I I am here today with Kathy Cochran, who is a holistic health and nourishment consultant based in Montreal, Canada. She teaches women to turn inward, the true source of wisdom for their self-care. She believes that if you give a woman a diet, you may improve her body now, but if you teach a woman how to listen to her body, you improve her health for life. Kathy's enlightening approach is a perfect blend of physiology and soul. Read more in her blog at her online home, www.wholehealthservices.ca, and I will have a link to that website and a link to her Facebook page in our show notes. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Wendy. It's so nice to be here. It's an honor, actually, to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you. So let's jump on in here. And we're thinking about spring, and even though as we record this, it was -20 here at my house last night, and you're farther north than us, so how cold was it where you were?
It's -20 here as well.
Oh, my goodness. So it seems like almost an impossible thing to be thinking of spring on a morning like this. But I know for me, my body is already telling me change is coming. The winter is on its final legs. I've noticed that here in the forest behind our house, we're starting to notice different species of birds coming back. The ladybugs in my house, we have these Fuji ladybugs, are all starting to appear again. So talking about spring and thinking about a rebirth around that, if you had the opportunity to guide, say, I don't know, Danielle Laporte, who I know we're both a fan of, and she said, Kathy, I'm ready to let go of the winter and all the heaviness that came along with it and birth some new life into this world through my gifts. How would you guide her?
Oh, that's a great question, Wendy. You know, my first instinct, as you were talking about the weather today, would be to tell her to go outside into that glorious sunshine, because yes, it is mighty cold out there, but that sun is shining and it's hot, and you can see the life coming back into the world, even though the snow and the cold are keeping it pretty much under wraps. But really, springtime for me is a time of celebration. And so I would say to Danielle, or whoever asked me that question, just go put on your prettiest dress, gather your best girlfriends, and celebrate each other. Celebrate the wonder and the beauty of each and every one. Have a feast of pleasure, of inspiration. There's so much female wisdom and intuition that we can cheer each other on with wine and food and song and dance and love.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I want to read something that you wrote that ties into this. We've forgotten that we're flesh and blood, sensual creatures. We've forgotten that our human nature is indelibly linked to Mother Nature. We've forgotten we're in relationship with her and the microorganisms in our body as well as the people around us. We're in relationship with the divine. Through our mind, heart, soul, we're in relationship with our very own thoughts and feelings and beliefs. These parts of us need to be nourished and cared for as much as our cells and organisms. I absolutely love that. It totally speaks to my philosophy and my soul. What do you think makes us forget, and how do we resurrect this relationship?
Yeah. Well, you know, we're living in a time where we're all surrounded by shoulds, right? There's advice everywhere, online, in books, what have you. Stop eating this, or don't eat that, don't do this because it's bad for you. And we think about having to punish ourselves at the gym because we overdid it on the weekend. We're treating our bodies like machines, and we're reading studies and different pieces of information from the outside that let us guide what's best for us. So it's almost like there's some one-size-fits-all model or some magic bullet that we're looking for, as if there's some sort of perfect answer, right? We look to the outside for solutions. So what's the best food to eat, the best exercise to do? We do all sorts of things to our bodies. We tuck them and tan them and slim them and deodorize them and shave them. And we're always working from the outside in. And I see that as only half of the equation, because we forget to put we forget to put the self into that equation and remember that we're part of it. It's a relationship, because when we're just working from the outside in, it's more like unrequited love.
Yes. How do the five senses play into this?
Well, certainly the five senses are part of the way that we interact with life. And sort of getting back to what that quote you read of mine before, that there's a relationship going on, which is, I guess, what I started to say before. So we see ourselves as a necessary part. We see ourselves as the focal point and everything coming in towards us, like the spokes of a bicycle wheel, I guess, for lack of a better image. But nature doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that. It's binary, right? We do have centripetal force that draws things in towards us, but we also have centrifugal force that pushes things away, and things are coming from the center outwards. And so it's an in and out, like the breath. It's an open and close. It's a give and take. So it becomes a two-sided relationship. And so we tend to focus on the one side of the relationship, and then we see ourselves as victims when something goes wrong, right? When the guy breaks up with us, or we gain a few extra pounds, or we get the disease, or whatever, we lose the job. And we ask, why is this happening to me? We see things happening to me, and then we try to control them. Where in fact, it's a two-part dance. It's that relationship. So when I talk about the senses, and certainly the senses are how we navigate in the world around us. It's how we know that we're safe, and how we figure out what to eat and what not to eat. And it's how we interact with other people. And it provides us with all the information we need, external information. But then we also forget to turn it around and realize that the senses provide us with internal information as well. So our feelings and our emotions, and what's actually going on in our body, and the interactions, as you said, we're reading before, but with our microorganisms, we have people living around us, but we have creatures living inside of us as well. And we have other aspects of ourself. We have our soul. We have our thoughts, our beliefs that we interact with. And our senses help us with that. And certainly the senses are just one piece of the way we interface with life. There are three of them. So the senses being one, breath being the other. You know, obviously we need it for that in and out of air coming, oxygen coming in and carbon dioxide leaving the body. But we also take in subtle energy. We take in different types of information with our breath. When we interact through the breath, we're also interacting with our inner world. That's how we access our emotions. And it's how we release different types of energy as well. And then our bodies are also impacted through nutrition. And this is how we take in the building blocks of life, and it's also how we digest and use these building blocks to transform into who and what we are, if that makes any sense at all.
You know what, it totally does, and I'm being so quiet because my mind is going in so many different places at once right now. And I love that because, so I think everybody who listens probably knows that my background is in exercise science. And so I've been in the health and fitness industry for over 20 years. And I know a lot about diet and nutrition, or about nutrition and exercise. I know for me, and I've written about this a lot in the past year, that Ayurveda really is the, it's the science of life. And for me, it has really become the direction that I have moved into in terms of how I look at what I am ingesting, digesting, assimilating, or eliminating. And you just touched on that with all three of those points. And what has been fascinating to me is that as I have started really looking at the food that I'm ingesting, it really does tie into those five senses, and how much I'm willing to pay attention to that. And even with the breath, as you were talking about, we take in these subtle energies. A smell can evoke a memory that is very powerful. And I think all of those memories that we have failed to digest and eliminate come back up as an opportunity for bringing it back into that harmony of unconditional love. I almost I'm getting really tripped up on the word healing lately, because it's being so used, and I don't know that it's a healing, or is it just an acceptance of what we've chosen, how we've separated from it, and how we're bringing it back in to either assimilate it or eliminate it. And your point, and I want to go back to this, is looking at those five senses as you turn them inward. And in your world, because I know you've gone on your own journey, how has this played out for you? Turning those five senses inward on your soul, and that separation within your own life.
Yeah, certainly. This is not something that came naturally. No, I guess it came naturally to me. It wasn't necessarily obvious. I'm late to the world of inner life and health coming from the inside out. I was raised by Catholic parents, and both my parents are also academics. So on the one hand, I had a complete denial of the body, and even it being somewhat unmentionable and potential for sin. On the other hand, I was taught through all the unwritten rules that academic goals, intellectual motivations, intellectual pursuits were the only valuable thing in life. So basically, the first half of my life was lived from the neck up, right? Yeah. And it took me, it's been a long process. But when I was 29, a friend of mine invited me to join her at Trying Yoga. And I thought, oh, great, some good stretching exercises and maybe a few headstands. And it was such a revelation to discover this practice that exercised the body, it exercised the mind, the heart, it connected body and spirit. It was really quite... It was absolutely a revelation. Like, I'd never experienced anything like that before, but it was so right. Like, it was like coming home. And it was at a yoga retreat later that year that I came across a book, Conscious Loving, by Gay and Kathleen Hendricks. Everybody knows Gay Hendricks nowadays for his for The Big Leap. Yeah. Well, this was one of his earlier books, and among all the lovely things that they teach in there, they explain how the emotions are felt in the body. And that, was completely foreign to me. I had understood emotions. I had certainly experienced a range of them, but I had never made the connection to feelings and to sensations in my body. And as such, I was sort of living a very surface life and realized sort of in my early 30s that, wow, here I am living this life that actually doesn't fit me. I was dissatisfied at work. I was dissatisfied in my marriage. I wasn't sure which way was up in so many ways. And I had to learn how to turn that inward and start examining from the inside out, where my whole life had been that outside in. And I learned through trial and error and reading books and taking classes that my primary relationship was the one to me, and that everything else flows out from that. And certainly how that came about was partly going back to school and studying holistic nutrition. Part of that was through getting divorced, which, you know, I don't suggest anybody get divorced to have to have a growth journey. It's very painful and very lonely. But these were also my golden years. I was making decisions for myself. I was doing things that I wanted to do. I was going camping when I felt like it. I was hanging out with girlfriends. I joined a women's choir. I hooked up with a friend of mine who had lost her husband at the same time, and she and I sort of bolstered each other through this tough time, even going out dancing sometimes together. And so I was learning how to negotiate life on my terms through my values and getting to know who I am and what I'm about. And adjusting my health issues and the way I ate, my relationship to food along the way.
So I want to clarify something. A little bit of an intuitive hit and a little bit of dangerous yoga knowledge on my own. When you talk about the relationship to me, would you clarify, you're not just talking about the me that is the essence of you, your soul, that guides the ego, but it's something more, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, me is a whole package. So yes, there's the essence of me. Sure you're familiar with that Teilhard de Chardin quote, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yep.
Right? And so that as spiritual beings, we're all one, so that there's so me is a part of the greater whole, as it were. But me does also include this actual flesh boundary of the body, and learning how to negotiate within the limitations of what you're given as a body is really important. So that things like making self-care choices, how you nourish yourself, and you know, nourishing yourself doesn't just include food, it includes the people you hang out with, your friends, your love life, your spiritual life, whether you belong to a religion or you just have a meditation and prayer practice, how you move your body, your connection to nature. So these are all individual choices that help develop the you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that you can then manifest yourself fully, so that you can then share your gifts and share that unique aspect of yourself.
I love that. What are some ways that you teach your clients to celebrate their beingness?
Yes, certainly. I'm always getting people away from the shoulds. The other thing I find a lot in my own life, and certainly in the clients that I see, is we all have an issue or a belief of not enough. Okay, I don't have enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not sexy enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever. There's always something that you don't have enough of. And so I'm always trying to turn that back to my clients to look at what it is that's enough. Like if I was going to ask you what a full cup looks like to you, what is enough, and what would your life look like if it was enough? And start tapping into their body to understand how that feels in the body. And also start looking for small things. And it might be a food choice. It might be a walk in the park. It might be a trip down south, whatever it is. But what are the little things that start lighting you up and bringing that sensation of enough to you? So, and there are other little things, like even looking for something like delicious, right? We talk about delicious. Everybody's depriving themselves of food and depriving themselves of enjoyment of things. And so we don't enjoy life anymore. We're always, again, looking from those shoulds and looking from the formula. And, oh my God, I've got to eat 10 pounds of kale a day, but I hate kale. But okay, so then what do you want to eat? And there are other ways of getting the nutrients in kale without having to eat the kale, and how can you enjoy it? Because part of that, even that interaction of nutrition that I mentioned before, your digestive system works ever so much better when you're actually enjoying what you're eating. And the way we assimilate any part of life is the same way, right? You'll take it in much more efficiently and assimilate it if it's delicious. So again, we're talking about food, we're talking about movement, we're talking about the people you interact with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I want to go back to what you were talking about, the not enoughness, which I think could be one of our biggest epidemics here in the United States, at the very least. And it's been a while since I have traveled abroad, but even there was a sense of that in all of the cultures where I went to. So tell me, from your perspective, how the mindset of lack has affected you, and how have you used that experience to help your clients?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I just wrote a blog post this week about whole food and relating that to our not enoughness, which I suppose is it can seem like a far-fetched idea. But the point I was making with that is that, we're all searching now for whole food as the way to go for health. This is food that's altered as little as possible and as close to the way it's found in the natural world. Obviously, you might need to peel something or cook it to make it edible or to make it digestible, but essentially you're trying to eat the food in the natural state as possible. Well, certainly in North America, anyone raised from the 50s through the mid-90s, I'd say, we were all into novelty food, right? So we were all raised on Chef Boyardee and honeycombs and like Kraft cheese slices, which were, I know this all came out of astronaut research and how to preserve food longer so that we can take it into outer space. But we're also taking the life out of the food and out of the nutrients. So yes, you can take a vitamin A pill, for example, but if you eat the carrot, you get the sweetness of the carrot, you get the crunch of the carrot, you get the fiber that's in the carrot, and you get that earth energy because it grew rooted into the ground. So there are different things, some physical nutrients and some subtle energy that we're getting with our food. And so I've been speculating on the fact that maybe some of this I'm not enough actually comes from the fact that we haven't been getting enough. If we were raised and have been eating more and more of the quote unquote junk, that perhaps we are in fact lacking in something.
Hmm. So that fascinates me to think about DNA, because our cells are continually, as long as we are physically alive, our cells are continually dying and birthing.
Mm-hmm.
And the DNA modifies and evolves based on our needs. And I think you're right, after multiple generations of being in a culture that is basically created in a laboratory, that there has been some changes. So not only physiology wise could that be happening, but I think also what the mentality of scarcity that's passed down, like you talked about, through the church, around
Mm.
pleasure, life, and deliciousness. And that passes down too through our energy, and affects our DNA. And it passes down through the culture and beliefs that we're taught, what is right and what is not. And
Absolutely.
so when you're working with somebody who's really ingrained in this, because you talked earlier, pardon me, about somebody being able to know what does the cup being full look like and feel like in their body. And I instantly felt resistance. And usually I'll feel this when I know that there's somebody listening that goes, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what that looks like.
Mm.
It's like, oh boy, okay. So for the people that are just so ingrained in this, what's one simple thing that they can do to start to surrender that resistance?
Absolutely. It's gets back to that whole idea of listening to your body. Um, that was that is sort of the credo on my website, and was part of what you read about me before. One thing that you can do is take the time, and this is like a 5-minute quiet process where you breathe into your center, into your body, and sort of clear a space in your body, and invite something that you absolutely love, that you absolutely adore. So maybe it's a trip to Paris that you had, or a pet that you love, or a child, or falling in love. Think of something that really lights you up and that you know makes you feel good, and notice what happens in the body. Notice the sensations that come up in the body. And this might be a color, it might be a warmth somewhere in the body. It could be in your legs, it could be in your torso, it could be in your shoulders. Just notice what comes up and describe that sensation. Describe what you see, what you feel. Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it light blue? Is it yellow? Is it green? Does it have a sound? Does it have a texture? Does it have a shape? And perhaps even see if there's a way that you can associate it to something else. It feels as if, dot, 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 what would fill in the blank? It feels as if there are a pair of angel wings sprouting out of my shoulder blades. This is just an example from one of my clients. Came up with that the other day. Just, or there feels like the sun is shining in my solar plexus. And just notice what that sensation is and hang out with it for a while. Maybe get to know it, maybe even talk to it. Say, hey, where'd you come from? What do you need? What can I give you? What can you give me? And see if you can allow that sensation to be in your body. And then after you've had enough time, you've grounded yourself and come back into the room, remember that sensation so that you can recognize it in your daily interactions, so that when you're having a conversation with the difficult client, when you're having an argument, when you're standing in front of the row of vitamins at the health food store and you don't know which to choose, tap into that sensation and let that sensation be your guidepost, your yes to figure out.
Awesome. I like it. I like it a lot. What if, at this point in your life, what's the one thing that you want to leave as a legacy? One thing that you wish to impart on the world, your little impact.
It's kind of the camping rules, which is, you know, when you go camping, the unwritten rule is that you leave the campsite in better shape than you found it. And so that's my hope for the world, that I want to leave the world a better place than I found it. So if it's teaching a handful of women how to get in touch with themselves and feed themselves better, if it's teaching a few women how to take charge of their lives and then have that vibration reverberate outward from them, if it's teaching people about that relationship, so the relationship of me to other, which includes me to the earth, so that we're literally leaving the earth a better place than we found it. That's my hope.
It's beautiful. What's the book that you most recommend to other people and why?
I have a few, certainly in general health, well, I guess in sort of general women's health, is Dr. Christian Northup's Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. She was the first person, at least in my experience, that openly brought that connection between conventional medicine and the health world to the inner world. And she has been, for the last 20 years, the champion of really teaching women the importance of putting herself first and her needs first and filling her own cup so that she is looking after everybody else in her life, because as women, we're nurturers, we're going to look after other people. How to fill your own cup so that you're nurturing others from the overflow. Her work has helped me personally, and yes, it's a constant source of wisdom and information for my work, for my clients.
That's great. What are you most grateful for?
Oh, and any given this morning it was my car starting. It was cold to get my son to school.
It's the simple things in the wintertime in our life.
It's the simple things every day, you know, and that's certainly. I've been so grateful for all this growth and nurturing, and within it all, I'm most grateful for my support system. I have girlfriends, I have online communities, I have private Facebook groups that I belong to. I have a book club. I am so surrounded and so supported by women who love me for who I am and respect me and are there for me to laugh with me and cry with me and just have a good time with me as need be, or listen to me yammer on about whatever I need to complain about. And so it's the women in my life that are the true gift.
And I have no doubt that is not by accident. It was very intentional, your desire to put together such a support group. How they came about may be a little bit more incidental, but it starts with that intention, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know you have a webinar coming up on April 2nd that
Mm-hmm.
will help us integrate some of this spring and celebration theme. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I'm going with this theme of celebrating you. And so at the beginning of March, actually, I'll be sending out a whole series of little tools to help you tap in and build that relationship with you and lay the foundation um, for that. For building a relationship with yourself. And so during that webinar, I'm going to go dive deeper into that concept of the three interfaces, what the senses are, and how we can focus more deeply on them, the breath, nutrition, both in terms of the food and in terms of digestion, and to look at how we can leverage those in terms of self-care and in terms of health and healing.
Fabulous. We will put a link to that in the show notes, so if anybody is interested in that. And I have one more question for you.
Sure.
What does whole being mean to you?
Hmm. For me, it's an image and a sensation, I guess. It's kind of, whole being is a sphere of light, or maybe it's energy. It's got a certain density to it, but it's definitely a glowing sphere. It's maybe how you might imagine a crystal ball would look.
Okay.
And it doesn't have defined edges. And can encompass a small area, or it can encompass a large area. But when I apply it to me, to myself, I see it and feel it in my body as sort of encompassing my whole torso, right? So it's kind of like its epicenter is kind of in my belly, and it glows from there. And it contains all level of my being. So it's the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, but without defining those levels, right? It just is. It's just all one. I am whole.
Wow. In all of the times that I have asked that question, that is truly the most unique response that I've ever had. I love it. And that's why I love that question. It is so subjective to the individual answering it.
It's a brilliant question. I love it.
It is always expanding my definition of it for myself. So thank you. If you guys would like to learn more about Kathy, remember you can go to wholehealthservices.ca, and again we'll have the links in the show notes. Kathy, it was an honor and a pleasure getting to chat with you today and geeking out on some of this health, mind, body stuff that I so adore.
Absolutely. I had a great time too, Wendy.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.